Hello, heathens! I'm Megan Angus, and this is Spinning the Wheel podcast. In this weekly audio ritual, we explore the 8 seasons of the witch's wheel of the year, and we discover how it is so much more than 8 Sabbats. We weirding witches time travel through holy days, festivals, and celestial events connecting our celebrations and magic to the past, present, and future. Our cackling fills the night as we take our turn gathering the wool, wielding the distaff, and spinning the wheel. What the fuck is up, Denny's? Okay, that was inappropriate. Sorry if you were playing this at work. Hi, it's Megan Angus. Welcome back to Spinning the Wheel podcast. Listen, I have been at a heavy metal music festival all weekend, and I'm a little fired up, okay? But I'm not hungover, so go me. I've been a good kid. Yes, it is I, your inflamed host, Megan Angus, and welcome back to yet another episode of Spinning the Wheel podcast. What are we doing this week? All kinds of cool stuff. Let's get grounded in it, shall we? This is Beltane season, waxing half moon in Virgo, lunar week number 9. Before we get into all of this stuff, just briefly, our next class is going to be in June, and it will be on Litha or midsummer or summer solstice. This will be a free class that I'm offering on my YouTube channel. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel to get alerts when that class is going live. If you would like to heckle me in chat, please feel free to try. And it's gonna be a rip roaring good time, damn it. I'm not a huge fan of summer. I'm sad. I'm always sad to see spring go. I love spring vibes. I'm not a fan of summer, mostly because I'm not a fan of heat. Which is, it's a great time for me to be alive here on planet Earth, as our summers are becoming more and more intolerable. I'm a fan of fall and winter. That's my time that I shine, for sure. But all the same, I know that there's a lot of fans of summer out there, and we're just about here. We have just about made it to summertime. We've only got a few weeks left. But because we've only got a few weeks left, that means that we have still a few weeks of spring and a few weeks of Beltane season. And, and so whatever work we mean to be getting done in springtime, whatever work we mean to be getting done in Beltane season, this is the time to get it done, because the wheel turns, right? And soon enough, it's going to be summertime, and we will be on to the next phase of the energy that we are working with in our solar cycle. So when we are hanging out here in Beltane energy season moments, actually, before I get into that, is there any other housekeeping business that I have? No, that's it. Let's get into the stuff. So when we are here in Beltane season, our witch's work centers around ideas of fertility, fecundity, and action. And I want to be super clear about this. I've mentioned this before, talking about it again, that fertility, fecundity thing, right? We can add virility to that collection of words as well. When we're moving through the first part of spring, Ostara season, it can be a much more abstract energy that we are working with. We are witnessing the fertility and the fecundity and the virility of the natural world. A lot of the emphasis there is on nature itself and the animal world. And then as we move forward into Beltane season, that energy changes form a little bit, and it starts to center its emphasis on humans. Or another way we could say that is we start to witness that energy in each other and in ourselves versus just seeing it happening in the natural world. So Beltane is known as a pretty randy, frisky, frolicky season of romping and sex and sexuality and sensuality. But what those words mean is very subjective from person to person. And so, all at the same time, I am, of course, encouraging you to delight in the senses and wake your body back up and come back to the body, continuing the work of coming back to the body that we are doing throughout spring. But how you as an individual engage in that stuff is very subjective. Anything that feels like you are waking your body back up, and anything that feels like um, it is inviting in a delighting of your five senses, that's great. That's fantastic. And it doesn't have to look like any particular thing. And I'm just saying that because people of all ages, people of all genders, and people of all sexualities are participating in, life here on Earth, and our Beltane season vibes. And any of us can be at any point in our journey with our body, and any of us can be at any point in our journey with what sensuality means or what sexuality means for us as individuals. And so, what I'm always encouraging here at this time of year is that you participate in that at the level that makes sense for you, where you are in your process. It does not have to look like any particular thing, as far as I'm concerned. As far as I'm concerned. And I just wanted to stress that because, again, there's a real hyping of like, you got to go bang it out during Beltane season. And that is totally appropriate for some folks. And it's totally not appropriate for some folks. So, in whatever way it's appropriate for you, in whatever way it's healthy and right and good for you, that's what we want to be focused on. So, what are all the different ways that you could stir up fertility and virility and fecundity for yourself? That's what we want to, and for your people, right? That's what we want to be focused on during Beltane season. Again, whatever form of that makes sense for you, is right for you, is healthy for you, is delicious for you, that's going to be the most effective. So that's the other reason why we want to be doing it, is if we're doing the magic, we want to be as effective as possible with our magic. So we also want to be engaging the form of magic that makes the most sense to us. Okay. Here's my little lecture at the beginning of the what are we doing? Oh yeah, it's a podcast. I almost said workshop. My life is a workshop. Okay. So that's the energy. That's our witch's work that we are touching on in Beltane season, and that can look like sexuality, sure. But another way that we can, another phrase I like to use here is a union of energies, and also things like an initiation into interpersonal mysteries. And those two things can look like a lot of stuff depending on the person and their process and where they are and all that stuff. But this is the stuff that is witches that we want to be focused on and that we want to be encouraging and assisting our community members with. As well as another way that we can engage in this very romping, frisky energy is to be very playful about things and pranking and playing jokes and being mischievous is another way, in my opinion, that we can engage this sort of, frisky, volatile, taboo, subversive energy. Yeah. Okay. There's the little lecture at the beginning. Take a sip of my beverage. Stay hydrated, people. And let's dive into it. Okay. Our week starts with Saturday, May 27th, 2023, 8:22 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Later in the day for everybody else around the planet, we have a waxing moon in Virgo at 6 degrees, opposite Saturn in Pisces at 6 degrees. Yes, the moon is aspecting other stuff in the sky, but when I talk about these things here in the podcast, I am looking for whatever planets or points are as close as possible to the moment, whatever degree the moon is at. I'm not looking at all the stuff that's like 5-10 degrees away. Somebody else can do it. Okay. So what are we getting with this? We have a lot of words there, right? Waxing half moon. We got Virgo. We've got an opposition from Saturn in Pisces. Okay. First off, this is our mutable earth of mutable air moon. Um, and we now that as I mentioned, we have moved into the last 4 weeks of Beltane. These 4 weeks are overseen by Gemini. I just posted a big piece about this over on Patreon. Um, and Gemini is a mutable sign. Gemini is an assistant to us in helping us mutate, adapt, and ultimately change shape. And what are we doing with that shape changing? We're changing out of the shape and shapes that we have been experimenting with during springtime, and we are changing into whatever shape or shapes we're going to want to work with as we move into summer and pick up the work that we're going to be doing in summer. So we love having a mutable sign overseeing that process as we move through the last part of this. Virgo, also a mutable sign. So, mutable, right? Virgo is also here on the intuitive level, on the daily habits level, on the personal level to help us as individuals talk to ourselves about the shape changing that we need to be doing, what needs to be left behind, what needs to be wrapped up, and ultimately what adaptations do we want to make to prepare ourselves as best we can for whatever's coming next in summertime. So, waxing half. This is the first half moon after the new moon. So we have the new moon, we have a waxing half, we have a full, we have a waning half, and we'll have a new again. Those are the four main aspects of the lunar phases. And with a waxing half, working with our metaphor that we work with every week, we have a branch. New moon, we have a seed. The waxing crescent, we have a little sprout. And then here at the waxing half, we have a branch. The sprout has grown up into a branch. And this point in the process is represented by some friction. A decision is required of us. And this moon is a really potent moon, just symbolically here in these last 4 weeks of Beltane. Last 4 weeks of Beltane, always going to be overseen by Gemini. And somewhere within the Gemini season, we're always going to have a waxing half moon in Virgo, more or less. Uh, and and Virgo is about discernment. Virgo is about kind of combing through the fine details of things and figuring out what's working, what's not working, and making sure that everything is sort of getting put in its place. That's Virgo's job, is to like really pay attention to the little details of things. So we have a mutable sign plus a mutable sign really here to assist us in like what exactly do we need to be doing to wrap up whatever we're doing in spring and get ready for whatever we're going to be doing in summer. And um and so the waxing half moon brings a type of friction. It brings a decision. And to have the discernment of Virgo assisting us with that is really cool. Um because we do want to make the right choices going forward, right? We do want to make sure that we are putting our energy into the stuff that needs our energy. So Virgo is again here to kind of oversee that process, and Virgo can be a little critical about things. All of us have Virgo in our chart somewhere. This is no shade on Virgos. I have my moon in Virgo, so I also can talk some shit on you guys. But but Virgo can be a little crunchy around things. Virgo can be a little hyper critical around things, but we want to remember, why is Virgo doing it? It's because Virgo is like, I'm trying to get it just right. I'm trying to get us as close to correct or perfection as possible. So in the waxing half moon, we have this moment of friction in our process. We have a moment where we need to call in some discernment and make some decisions and say, okay, I got to put that down and I got to pick this up. This is not working. Here's what needs to be corrected. It's that moment, when we're on the high seas and we look at the map and we're like, oh, wait, I need to make a 2-degree adjustment or I'm going to be on the wrong continent. So Virgo is here now to say, hey, let's make those adjustments halfway to the full moon, and get it going. Of course, it's also being opposed by Saturn and Pisces at 6 degrees. And an opposition between the moon and Saturn is not necessarily super fun vibes. It can actually really manifest as feeling super alone and feeling super isolated, whether that's the truth or not. It's really important if you are finding yourself in the midst of negative talk this week that feels alienating or isolating, or I'm always alone, or no one understands me, or I can never count on my friends, no one's reaching out to check on me. If we find ourselves having those types of internal dialogues, I encourage you to just kind of do whatever you can to break that moment. You don't need to focus on something hyper happy. You can focus on something totally neutral. Like, I know humans. Like the wall has paint on it. There is a cloud in the sky, right? Like, very, very neutral. Um, it will pass. The moon is the one making the transit, and the moon is going to swiftly scooch past this point. But there's not a lot of other astrology this week, and some of the other astrology this week is going to kind of reinforce this feeling of critical yuck that we can get from Saturn. Um, so, what's important, I think, is that it can be a self fulfilling prophecy. We tell ourselves, my friends don't care, I'm totally isolated. And then we totally isolate ourselves and we don't reach out. And then all of a sudden we're super ultra mega alone and nobody knows how to get a hold of us, right? So just check yourself on that. If you need to have a little pout, yeah, you can have a pout for a treat. Fuck it. But recognize it needs to be a temporary pout, right? Like, give yourself that moment. Put some emo jams on, right? Play some Cocteau Twins or, or Lana Del Rey or whatever, right? Like, watch a sad film, and let yourself feel that ennui, and then say to yourself, "This is temporary. I'm just having a moment. I know my friends and family love me. I know that I'm not alone. And I also know that I can walk outside and make new friends whenever I want to. Um, I have to choose to engage that energy. Uh, and so here's where the combination of all this stuff could be yucky. That's, all of what I just said about telling yourself you're feeling very isolated and then isolating yourself and sort of making that come true. Here is where that could be really helpful. If we can push aside the emotional aspect of this, of feeling very isolated, Virgo likes to be isolated most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time. Virgo likes to be alone. The Virgo parts of us do well when they are allowed to just be alone and get their work done. That's really where it's at. So if we need to pull ourselves away from the group and focus on something for a little while to get our head right, or to get a job done or something along those lines, then this is really helpful, right? Like, oh, nobody wants to hang out. Cool, because I shouldn't be hanging out anyways. I got to get my work done. But also saying to ourselves, that's just temporary. I'm doing this afternoon, or I'm doing this for a couple of days. I'm going to isolate myself, get this done, and then come back to the world, right? Okay. So that's what's up for me, in my opinion. I guess that's what's up with this moon. It can feel very isolating, and if we can check ourselves on the emotional aspect of that and recognize I'm not actually isolated, my people are here, they love me, and I can reach out to folks whenever I want to, then we can utilize this moment of feeling isolated to get something done that would benefit from us being isolated and focusing solely on that thing. Okay. For our lunar body work, when we are hanging out with a moon in Virgo, we are awakening, activating, adorning, and stimulating, preparing for action the large and small intestine, the spleen, the pancreas, and the spleen and the pancreas both. Um, their jobs their jobs are to filter stuff out of the body that we don't need, and to produce the enzymes in our body that break stuff down, and also to produce hormones. So, sits really nicely with the work that we're doing, right? Like, it's the friction moment. Let me break this down. Let me see what doesn't belong. Let me see what's hindering my process and progress. And then later when the moon moves into Libra, we'll continue that process, but we're going to be picking out the things that we want to keep and maintain. As always, I say every single week, not a doctor of the human corpus, a doctor of the arcane and mystical arts. So I don't know jack shit about healthcare. Check in with your trusted health advisor to see if this information is appropriate for you. And also, you can always work with the metaphor. So, what are the parts of you that engage in the process of discernment? Those parts of you, uh, give them a little love and a little extra attention and support this week. For our plant body buddies, nothing. When our moon is in Virgo, we don't want to actually do a lot of stuff with our plants necessarily, but we can do stuff with plants. There's two different traditions there of like, don't ever touch your plants when the moon is in Virgo, and then there's another tradition of like, hell yeah, do stuff with your plants. So your mileage may vary. Just check with your intuition. But if you're of the doing nothing variety, do some research for your plants. But you can also cultivate plants. You can cut wood. You can harvest plants and herbs for drying and storage. And then if you are of a mind to work with plants even more so, planting annuals that are yielding above ground crops, especially our viney crops like beans and melons and peas and tomatoes and squash and peppers and all of that stuff. Other things that are also assisted here: cucumbers, garlic, grains, cereals. And then we can take cuttings, we can do graftings, and as I said, harvesting above ground for drying and storage. This whole stretch of time leading up to midsummer and then the month after midsummer is the best time magically for our harvesting herbs that we intend to use for magic for the rest of the year, or for cooking, honestly, because the flavors are intense. But it's thought that these plants are sort of filling up with the power of the sun at this time of year. And so we want to harvest them when they are at the height of their power. So it's still filling as we close in on summer solstice. And then at summer solstice, very sacred time for herb harvesting. And that month after summer solstice, also very sacred time for herb harvesting. So, you might do some pre-funking for that, right? Clear space in your kitchen, or wherever it is that you're intending to dry herbs. You might clear that space now. You might look at a drying rack. You might think about what other supplies you want to grab. If you are going hardcore witchcraft, you might want to get yourself a white handled knife. You can do some research about that. The white handled knife is a tool that a lot of witches and pagans and heathens utilize, that is specifically blessed and dedicated to the job of harvesting herbs and other plant material for magical practices. So all of that sort of preamble is very appropriate at this time. Okay. We have no other astrology for this day. So enjoy. Just the moon and some pouting, and then we move on. The other thing that's happening on this day, our holy day, our one holy day that we have, is from our Roman friends and ancestors, and this is the Dies Natalis of the Temple of Mentz. Dies Natalis is the birthday of the temple. So this would have been the day that they laid the first rock, or they laid the first brick for the foundation, or they broke the ground for foundation, something along those lines. Or might have even been the day that the temple was dedicated. But who is Mentz? Mentz is a Roman goddess, also known as Mens Bona, and it means good mind, literally translated when we say Mens Bona, good mind or mind of goodness. And her name is translated in a couple of different ways. So some groups of people see this as right thinking, aka being of sound mind, being of a healthy mind. Very appropriate for a moon in Virgo, right? All about discernment, all about thinking clearly, thinking accurately, approaching things with a clear mind, all of that good stuff, all that cool stuff. Also, because it's the Romans, uh, mens bona, the idea of good mind, would have also been correct thinking, quote unquote, correct thinking, right? And we see a lot of that in our common society, right? People telling us that's not the way to think about this. You should be thinking about it in this way instead, or, dirty thoughts, impure thoughts, they'll ruin you. And that was definitely part of the vibe for the Romans as well. This idea of like, you've got to think happy thoughts for a happy society, that kind of stuff. So, mens bona or mens, where the word mensa comes from, etc., was at its root about witnessing our intelligence and utilizing our intelligence to its best benefit. A very appropriate attitude for a day with the moon in Virgo. Okay, that's it for Saturday, May 27th. Let's move on to Sunday, May 28th. All right, Sunday, May 28th. Let's start off with the astrology for this day. We have the Sun in Gemini square Saturn in Pisces, both at 6 degrees. Exciting. Who doesn't love a Sun square moment? Literally everyone does not love it. Okay, so continuing with the slightly bummer jam vibes of Saturday, we now move into this square between the Sun and Saturn. Sun is our sense of self. It's our creative source. It's our creative center. It's our sense of self. And Saturn is, what's my if you if you're new here, my nickname for Saturn is Angry Grandpa. I also refer to Saturn as the Big No. And so here is the Big No or Angry Grandpa squaring off with Sun, our sense of self. It doesn't feel super great, and it may not feel super great. This may compile or compound, I guess I should say, the some of those isolated feelings or alienation feelings from the day before with the Moon Saturn opposition that we're experiencing. Kind of feel it like it drags the vibes out a little bit. But here's the gig. The Saturn has just moved into Pisces a couple months ago, right? We've been talking about it for a while. Lots of astrologers have been talking about it for a while. And one of the things that I have been insisting about Saturn being in Pisces is that there is an opportunity, a real opportunity, while Saturn is in Pisces, for us to build real world architecture, constructs, containers, boundaries, whatever, around our fantasy, Pisces, our utopic vision of how life could be for ourselves as individuals, for our communities, for Earth at large. And Pisces wants things that are like really, really fantastic. And Saturn wants things that are really, really responsible and grounded. And it sounds on the outset like those are totally in opposition to each other. I don't think they have to be. I think that what can happen is Pisces is like, here's how cool could be. And Saturn is like, totally, but realistically, here's what we could actually accomplish. Right. And so we kind of can have our cake and eat it too, in a sense, because Saturn is like, hey, if we're gonna actually have a fantastic time, if we're gonna actually like have utopia, we will need some sort of a structure to hold that, right? And so that's our work for the next 2.5 years of Saturn hanging out in Pisces, is how do I build the container that will hold my fantastic vision? There's going to be moments of adjustment. This is a day where there's some moments of adjustment. Anytime we're getting a square from Saturn or something is squaring Saturn in this 2.5 year process, it's a moment where Saturn is going, okay, so here's where I have to bring you some bad news, where we have to shave off a little here, or we're going to have to compromise on this thing a little bit, or out of these 10 things, here's the 2 that we're going to have to leave off to make the other 8 possible. That's the vibe that Saturn is bringing throughout this work. So on this day, there might be a lot of talking about our responsibilities as personal, as individuals. Might be talking about responsibilities with our family constructs or our community constructs. might be talking about our responsibilities as members of a society, members of a civilization. Um, but there also might be a little bit of one group of people or the other group of people within that conversation trying to hide some of their motives. And that's leaning back to that, like, but I want my fantasy, but I want my vision. So what if I just lie a little bit about what's actually going down? And then maybe I can sneak in what I want later. It's probably not going to work out, but you do you, babe. Good luck. How else could this day feel? Melancholy. Um, could feel really constricted, could feel really somber, right? So again, kind of in league with this moon in Virgo opposing Saturn, same kind of continuation of that stuff. Other things that could come up for us on this day. Um, Again, a conversation or working around our responsibilities. Uh, Adjustment to the fantasy. And pruning is another word that I have written down here. Let's talk about pruning for just 1 second. When we are growing our house plants, whether it's our little, you know, pothos that we have bought from Trader Joe's for $4.99, or we've got some fantastic garden out, behind our house, or whatever our gig is, anytime we're pruning a plant, it can feel like a bummer. It can feel like, oh no, I finally got this thing to grow. I don't want to prune it. I don't want to stop it, right? The vine is so beautiful and it's amazing and it's finally doing something. How dare I come along and cut this thing off? And yet, the seasoned gardener, right? The seasoned plant grower knows every time they prune a plant, they are giving that plant an opportunity to double down on its fortitude, to make itself stronger and healthier, and produce more growth. And those parts that have been pruned off potentially can become their own plants. So, what on the surface of our work right now might seem like constriction, might seem like we are cutting something off. It might seem like we are, putting too stern of a boundary on our work. What might seem like that right now might actually be strengthening the entire project and providing more opportunities for more growth in more places elsewhere down the road. If you have ever grown a tree that bears fruits of any kind, you know that you have to prune that tree back so that the branches grow strong enough to be able to hold the weight of the fruit. Hang out with that metaphor for a minute. So on this day, when it feels like Saturn is just rolling in and harshing all the vibes, they are. That's Saturn's job. That's what Saturn does. It's like harsh, vibe harsher Capitan. But also, it's like, I'm not just here to bum everybody out. I'm here to show you with a little constriction and a little reduction and a little control, we actually become stronger and are capable of producing more later. That thing. That's what's up. That's what's up. That's the astrology for Sunday, May 28th. So now let's very quickly look at the holy days of May 28th. We actually have a couple of really cool ones. One, from our pagan and Catholic friends and ancestors, we have a feast dedicated to Our Lady of Miracles. This is another name for the Virgin Mary, or Mary Mediatrix, who also has that version of her has a holy day later this week. And Our Lady of Miracles is literally that, a version of the Virgin Mary that shows up and produces miracles, saves people from terrible experiences. Cool. Thanks, Mary. Also on this day, running from May 28th to June 5th this year, we have, from our Roman friends and ancestors, Vestalia. And this is a huge festival dedicated to the goddess Vesta. Vestalia was a Roman religious festival in honor of Vesta, the goddess of the hearth and the burning continuation of the sacred fire of Rome. Domestic and family life in general were represented by the festival of the goddess of the house and of the spirits of the store chamber, Vesta, and the Penates, or Penates. And so Last week, if you remember, we had the opening of the Temple of Vesta, and now a week later, we have Vestalia actually kicking in hardcore. This was a huge festival in Rome. It was very important to Romans, especially everybody in Rome. Vesta was often not depicted as an anthropomorphic goddess. She was usually not depicted as like a being, but instead she was depicted as a sacred flame and was living, existing in the temple of Vesta as a sacred flame. And her flame was tended by the Vestal virgins. Um, Vesta oversaw or oversees the hearth of the home. And so the hearth is the literal heart of the home. It was the fire of the home that would never go out, the literal fire that would have been used for cooking and heating the home and things like that, but also the sacred fire, the heart, the sacred flame of the home in terms of the warmth and the love, the spirit of the home. As we've talked about a lot here on the podcast, the Romans were very, very into the idea that every single thing had a spirit, had an energy to itself. And so Vesta was the living embodiment, or thought to be the goddess that oversaw, I guess I should say, the goddess that oversaw the living embodiment of the heart or the spirit of the house and the family that resided within it. But that's not the only thing that she did. She also was really deeply connected to the idea of liminality or thresholds, and thresholds were super sacred to her. We get the tradition of brides being carried over a threshold from uh, her priestesses and the Vestal virgins and others being carried over thresholds into her temple. Um, she held chastity very sacred, and so if a bride was walking into her temple for blessing, someone would have to pick her up and carry her over the threshold, lest she kick the threshold accidentally and receive a curse from the goddess. Love that, love that. So it was thought of as a good omen for the bride to be carried and her feet to never touch the threshold. Tripoli? That's not a word. That's a city. That's okay. All right. Back to the vibes. Okay. Um, Interestingly, um, Vesta was present at all weddings, and so was Janus, the two-faced god. Vesta was the threshold itself, and Janus was the doorway itself. And so, here's Janus looking forwards and backwards, and here's Vesta holding the place where we move from forward to backward, or from the past into the future. So they oversaw all of that stuff. In fact, Vesta and Janus were invoked so frequently that the evocation of these two names simply came to mean to pray. So they were consistently asked to join the party. Vesta also is connected to deities like Tellus and Terra, and had a lot to do with agriculture and growing things and all of that good stuff. So big deal, big deal. Um, it's interesting because, like I said before, in her temple, most temples in Rome that were dedicated to a goddess or a god had an actual statue or some kind of a depiction of the deity. Vesta's temple had a sacred flame. I just think that's so cool. I also have a lot of fire in my chart, so I might be biased a little bit here. But um, so it was. I love that, and one of the things that I read about was that no water was allowed in the temple unless it had absolutely had to be there. Up to the idea that at the temple they had jugs for water that had a tiny little foot at the bottom. Uh, that would not allow the jug to stand. So if you set down the jug, it would tip over and spill out the water automatically. I just think that's really cool. The vessels were called futiles or futilies. Um, and so it was futile, right? Like the water cannot exist here. I just think that's really cool. As mentioned, Vestal virgins. There's a lot to learn about the Vestal virgins. We can't get into all of it now, but they were priestesses that were sworn to service for 30 years under Vesta, and they took care of the temple and they kept the sacred flame burning. Um, Vesta is connected to the birth of Romulus and Remus. Um, and a bunch of other cool stuff from Roman history. If you're not familiar, Romulus and Remus, the twins. Hey, wait, isn't Gemini season like here? Huh, that's interesting. Must be cool. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. Um, she's connected to a lot of really cool elements of deep and early Roman myth. So check it out. Check out Vesta. She's really, really cool. And this, we have now stepped into the week of celebration or weeks of celebration to her, Vestalia. Um, leave a blessing at a doorway or a threshold for her. I'm sure she'll be stoked. Okay, that's it. Those are our holy days for Sunday, May 28th. So scooching on to Monday, May 29th. Our only astrology is that the moon is entering Libra. Cute. I think that, I know that I haven't been talking too much about the other days that the moon moves into signs, just when we actually have a facet, like an actual aspect of the moon. But Moon in Libra tends to bring sweetness and lightness and harmony to a lot of our social interactions. So, if you find yourself feeling pretty bummed out over the weekend and kind of weird at the beginning of the week, hopefully when the moon moves into Libra, that vibe starts to lighten up a little bit. Um, Great time to go make some art, see some art, all of that good stuff. Quickly, I'm going to interrupt myself because, hi, Queen of Tangents, to mention that there is one other astronomical thing happening on this day, even though we don't have any astrology of note for this day. And it is that Mercury will be reaching its greatest Western elongation. What the does that mean? Uh, what that means is Mercury is as far away from the sun as it's going to get in its orbit to one side. It does this twice in its orbit. There's a western elongation and an eastern elongation. And it just means that it's as far out from the sun as it can get. The phenomenon that we will witness is that Mercury is rising in the mornings as a morning star before the sun rises. It's really, really beautiful. So if you're staying up super late or if you're waking up ultra early, you might look to the east. If you're here in the Northern Hemisphere, you might look to the east and witness Mercury rising as a morning star before the sun rises. It's really, really beautiful. This is just an interesting astronomical moment, but also I thought it was kind of cool because our week is sort of ruled by our waxing moon in Virgo. Virgo, of course, is not only ruled by Mercury, but Mercury is exalted in Virgo. So Mercury vibes for me are really abounding in subtle underworld ways this whole week. So I just wanted to mention that. I thought it was a cool thing. If you get an opportunity to see it, go check it out. Okay. Our holy days for Monday, May 29th, we have Oak Apple Day in the UK from our United Kingdom friends and family. And Oak Apple Day, in and of itself, is dedicated to, looking at the Wikipedia page, it's dedicated to the restoration of the Stuart monarchy in May of 1660. Sure, it is. Um, Oak apples are these seed pods slash apples, quote unquote, that grow on oak trees. They kind of look like testicles. Just gonna say that they kind of do. And the idea is that on this day, people are wearing sprigs of oak leaves for the celebration of this king dude, whatever, restoration of the monarchy. Sure. Also, we happen to be in the season of the Oak King. And the season of the Oak King runs from winter solstice to summer solstice. So we have officially entered the last 4 weeks of the Oak King's reign. And here we have a day dedicated to the Oak King, wearing sprigs of young oak leaves and oak apples, quote unquote, over our hearts, right? You would pin them on your chest over your heart. Um, for what? For a king that was recently restored? Yeah, sure. Or perhaps a king that is about to die, aka the fight that we will see between the Oak King and the Holly King that is going to take place at summer solstice. The Oak King will be bested by the Holly King in a variety of ways, and the Holly King will reign from summer solstice to winter solstice. So, here again, these last 4 weeks, we have this holiday dedicated to wearing this symbol of virility and fertility and fecundity, produced by oak trees, dedicated to the Oak King. Okay. Also on this day, we have the heliacal rising of the fixed star Ain. Ain, Ain, is the northern bull's eye, or the right eye in the head of the bull. And eyes and deities, kind of a big deal. Um, we know that in Egyptian myth, um, the sun and the moon are the two eyes of a couple of different gods and goddesses, actually, depending on who you're talking to. Um, so the eyes of gods is kind of a big deal. The eyes of deities, kind of a big deal. So this is the eye of the bull, or the bull's eye. So, thinking about that imagery of the bullseye, right? How do we use that phrase now in modern parlance? We mean it to say the center of things, the exact target, right? If I hit something in the bullseye, if I hit the bullseye, I have hit it dead on, right? I have hit the very center. I've gotten as close as I can. It's as perfect as it gets. What a cool image to work with here again in these last 4 weeks of spring, these last 4 weeks of Beltane season. Let me hit the bullseye. What exactly do I need to do to get as close as I can to my target? That's what's up. So we have this deity, or this archetype, aka the fixed star, kind of overseeing this process. Um, uh, is there anything else I want to say about this? No, I think that's good. I think you all get the point. Okay. Moving on to Tuesday, May 30th. We have no astrology of note for this day. We do have a lot of holy days, though. So, getting directly into that, we have the heliacal rising of the fixed star Aldebaran. And Aldebaran, kind of a big deal. Aldebaran is also found in Taurus. Um, and this is the left eye of the bull. Hey, hey, interesting. So there's a lot of stuff. As I just mentioned, the eyes of deities, kind of a big deal. The left eye versus the right eye of deity uh, is also has potency to it. Um, in Hermetic magic, in Kabbalistic magic, we will often see a figure that is meant to be a representation of God, like the the source, and we will see them in profile, meaning we can only see one side of their face, we can't see the other side of their face, which means we can see one of their eyes and we can't see the other eye. And the idea there is like there's only so much of God that we can know. There's only so much of God that we can actually perceive with our human corpus and our tiny little mortal minds. And there's another part of source or deity or God or ancestor that's just like, dude, who knows? Who knows? I can't even see it. It's literally turned away from me. It would blind me. Is some sources are like, you can't handle the truth. You can't deal with it. Here's the part of God you could look at. Don't even try to look at the other side. And so these two fixed stars are kind of representing these two facets of source or deity. Aldebaran is one of the 15 Behenian fixed stars. The Behenian fixed stars are extra fancy. And they are stars as a magical system that are worked with by lots of different groups. So, if the fixed star thing is something that's interesting to you, this is a great time to start studying it because we're hanging out with one of the really fancy ones. Um, how fancy? Extremely fancy. Not only one of the 15 Behenian fixed stars, but Aldebaran is thought of as one of the four key stars in the heavens, also called the archangel stars. And so this collection of stars is Aldebaran, which connects us to the archangel Michael or Michael, um, the military commander of the heavenly host. I'm reading this directly from astrologyking.com. Also called the Watcher of the East. Um, and then we have Gabriel, Archangel Gabriel, which is Formalhaut, the Watcher of the South. Raphael, which connects us to Regulus, the Watcher of the North, and Oriel, which connects us to the fixed star Antares, the Watcher of the West. And at one time, they don't anymore because of the precession of the equinoxes. We've gone over this. But at one time, they marked the equinoxes and the solstices. Bam. Right? So there's our solar cycle and our fixed star cycle. At one point, were lined up with each other. And this is part of why they would have been thought of as the four great pillars of the universe, is because this is where stuff is, really important stuff is going down. This star is connected to a lot of power and power dynamics. And it really depends on, other stuff in your chart and other things that are going on at the time. It can indicate things like honor and intelligence and eloquence, but it can also indicate things like death and ruin, like pretty cash, right? It's just fantastic or horrifying, whatever. It's cool. But it's because we're dealing with a lot of power. And that's how it works with a lot of these archetypes. It's pretty spicy. Again, because of the precession of the equinoxes, Aldebaran has actually been in the sign of Gemini since the 1200s, which was around the height of the Christian Crusades against Islam. And it's an interesting thing considering the conflict between these two schools of thought. And uh, and yet ultimately coming from the same source, as it were. But yeah, we've got Aldebaran hanging out this week, bringing in a lot of power, bringing in a lot of intensity to whatever it is that we're doing. So for me, this is lending itself to the discernment work that we're kicking off the week with our waxing moon in Virgo. That's like, where am I putting my power? Who is getting what from me? And do they deserve it? And, what am I creating? That kind of stuff. Okay. Also on this day, from our Hindu friends and ancestors, we have Ganga Dussehra. From our pagan friends and ancestors, we have Frigg's Day. This is from our modern Wheel of the Year calendars. This is a day dedicated to the goddess Frigg. From our pagan / Catholic friends and ancestors, we have the Feast of Saint Joan D'Arc. Goddess bless. Big fan of Joan. I know, probably very surprising, right? Who knew? Joan to me is a quintessential Gemini archetype. Joan, as far as I'm concerned, was a master magician, an incredible witch. Those are not words that I think they would necessarily have used to describe themselves, because they definitely thought of themselves as a very devout Christian, very, very dedicated to Christ. But they were obviously extremely magical. And, if you read the right books, Jesus was a magician too, right? But we're in the season of people being magical and hearing voices. That's all under the auspices of Gemini. Also, Joan, very much gender blendy, right? Very much non-binary being, or a polygendered being. They kind of were whatever gender they needed to be to get the job done. You need me to be a man? Fine, great, I'm a man. Let me get on my horse and go into battle. Rode a horse. Again, deep connections to Gemini there as well. So I love that. Now, this isn't, this day is dedicated to Jeanne d'Arc in our modern Wheel of the Year pagan situations, and in a lot of the U.S. Catholic situations. There are other times within this part of the year in Europe where various countries will have like a week dedicated to Joan d'Arc. They don't always exactly line up, but it's always around this time of year. It's always sometime at the very end of Taurus season or somewhere in Gemini season. Always. Okay. Moving on to our Roman friends and ancestors have another festival happening at this time called Matralia. And this was dedicated to Mater Matuta, an indigenous Latin goddess whom the Romans eventually made equivalent to the dawn goddess Aurora, or the Greek goddess Eos. She was a goddess of female maturation and also the dawn. So mothering, but the deeper things that motherness, quote unquote, brings, which is ultimately the production of the physical plane, and the raising up and the rearing of things on the physical plane, the maturing and the nurturing of things on the physical plane. So Matralia, dedicated to Mater Matuta. And is there anything else I need to say about that? No. It was a festival only for single women or women in their first marriage. They would offer prayers and a sacrifice, etc., etc. I don't have a lot of information on it. I don't know how huge it was as a festival, but if it's noted somewhere, it was a big enough deal for somebody to write it down. Also on this day from our Roman friends and ancestors, we have the Dies Natalis of the Temple of Fortuna. Throughout the Gemini season, we have multiple holidays dedicated to Fortuna, the goddess of fortune, in a bunch of different aspects. Fortune that oversees victory, fortune that oversees the public, fortune that oversees bad luck, fortune that oversees production, like all kinds of stuff. So this is yet another moment dedicated to the birthday of the temple, dedicated to Fortuna. All right. That's everything for May 30th. Let's move on to May 31st. But before that, how about an ad? Okay. If you love this podcast, you can support this work through Patreon. Thank you a bajillion billion times. See, the sirens are going off even as I say it. Thank you so much to my patrons. You guys don't even know. You don't even know. Thank you so much. You can sub for as little as $1 if you just think this podcast is dope and you want to support it. I don't run ads on the podcast, partly because I don't want to, and partly because I won't get paid even if I do. So screw them, man. You can sub, as I said, for as little as $1 or $5, even if you want to just support the podcast. And this is plenty of information. But if you want even more information, extra podcasts, extra videos, extra information about the Wheel of the Year, magical practices, tarot, etc., etc., subbing at the higher levels, you get all kinds of cool free stuff. And at the even higher levels, you get free readings every month with me to be able to integrate all of this information into your personal life based on what's going on in your natal chart and all of that other good stuff. Join and change your life forever. Or, whatever. Thanks so much for the support. If you can't support financially, I completely understand, because life sucks on Earth right now. It's too expensive for everything. Tell a friend, share it on social media, give it a thumbs up. If you're feeling especially hedonistic, you can leave a rating or a review. All right, that's the end of the ad. Let's get back to the podcast. And that brings us to Wednesday, May 31st, where we find at 7:19 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, later in the day for everybody else around the planet. A gibbous moon in Libra at 24 degrees, and it is square Venus in Cancer at 25 degrees. So, again, that's a lot of words. Let's break it down. First off, we have a gibbous moon. What the heck is that? This is our last lunar phase before the full moon. And our metaphor that we're working with is a vine. We are beginning to pick up some momentum in our process. So we started with the seed at the new moon. We had a little sprout at the waxing crescent. And then at the beginning of the week, we had our waxing half, which provided us with a branch. A decision needed to be made. And now here we are at the gibbous moon, which is that the branch has turned into a vine and we are full steam ahead. We're going for whatever it is that we're going for. And then, oh no, it's square Venus. Actually, NBD, guys, no big deal. Moon and Venus love hanging out with each other. So even with a square, even with an opposition, it's pretty smooth sailing. It's pretty chill vibes. This is, I think, again, a really, as I mentioned, when the moon entered Libra, I think that this is a nice, or could be, a nice balm to the funky vibes that might have been hanging out at the beginning of the week, where things were maybe a little heavy, a little serious. Moon in Libra hanging out with Venus. Moon and Venus hanging out already, it's going to be chill. Moon in Libra is extra chill. Like, let's socialize, let's have fun, let's make it beautiful, let's have it taste good, let's enjoy life. If there's any issues with the square from Venus, it's that we might be encouraged to overdo it a little bit, whatever it is, and you know what overdoing it means for you. So you might want to overdo it a little bit. Hey, you know where you are in your process. Maybe that's appropriate to overdo it a little bit. Maybe it's not. Maybe a little moderation would be appropriate for you. But either way, I think that this Moon plus Venus situation is pretty cute, and I think that it will bring some sweetness as we roll through the middle of the week and head towards the weekend. Great for socializing, great for hanging out, great for making art, great for beautifying our house, great for going through your closet and, choosing like what's going to be the cute outfits for the summer, all of that. Very appropriate. Very, very good. For our lunar body work, as we are hanging out with a moon in Libra, we are awakening, activating, adorning, stimulating, and preparing for action the hips, our kidneys, and our bladder. And so the kidneys, as I was saying before with the moon hanging out in Virgo, moon in Virgo is like, let me be discerning and pick out all the stuff that I'm not utilizing that's not going to serve me. Moon in Libra is, let me pick out all the stuff that is going to serve me. Let me retain the things that are going to be helpful for me. And then ultimately, the bladder is like, cool, that's my last job, and then we're out of the pool after that. Again, not a doctor, but the metaphor. Okay. For our plant body work, we are still kind of leaving the plants alone during Libra. And again, there's two schools of theory here: leave the plants alone or do stuff with the plants. So you pick. But if you are leaving your plants alone, aesthetics. So this is a great time to wipe down your plant containers, wipe down your plant stands, wipe down your plant leaves if they're getting dusty. If you've got decorations or lights around your plants, this is a great time to fuss with that and make it cute and, fidget with your decorations and things like that. If you are going with I am going to touch my plants and do things, then this is a great time for planting flowers and other plants for beauty. So planting for aesthetics is fantastic, as well as planting plants that you intend to use for beauty or glamour magic going forward. Also very, very appropriate. And glamour magic takes a lot of different forms. Don't be fooled into thinking that glamour magic is strictly about looking cute. It goes way deeper than that. Um, but also, we can plant annuals that yield above ground crops, just like at the beginning of the week. So all of our viney crops, right? We're literally in the gibbous vine. Why wouldn't we be planting crops or attending to our plants and crops that get viney? So that's all of our vines. That's our pothos. That's our inch plants. That's all kinds of stuff, right? That's viney house plants as well as our viney foods outside. Um, and as I said before, taking cuttings, grafting, and harvesting above ground for drying and storage. Very appropriate. Other than all of that stuff, we do not really have any other astrology. Later in the day, the moon is going to scooch into Scorpio. And that's just sexy. Enjoy. Enjoy some sexy vibes with the moon in Scorpio. That's all I have to say about that. Not going to dwell on it too much, but our holy days for this day, from our Hindu friends and ancestors, we have Nirjala Ekadashi. There is an Ekadashi every month. The Nirjala Ekadashi is kind of one of the fanciest ones of the year. Check in with a Vedic astrologer. And I know some of you are listening. Check in with a Vedic astrologer if you want to know more about the Ekadashis and how to work with them. It's a very cool system within astrology. From our Catholic friends and ancestors, we have the Feast of the Queen of Heaven, yet another title for Mary. But we know that the Queen of Heaven certainly is going to relate us back to goddesses like Vesta, right? Or Mater Matsuta, um, and the other versions of the Virgin Mary that we've been talking about earlier in this week. From our pagan and Catholic friends and ancestors, we have the Holy Day of Divine Friendship, how appropriate here in Gemini season. And from our Catholic friends and ancestors, we have the Feast of Mary Mediatrix, the mediator, as I mentioned earlier this week. So lots of Mary stuff going on this week. All right, that brings us to Thursday, June 1st. And our astrology on this day, relatively chill, not that super big of a deal, I don't think. Jupiter is conjunct the North Node in Taurus at 3 degrees. How I think that we can possibly use this day or utilize this astrology is in league with the adjustment vibes of the week, right? Dialing in on what our responsibilities are, dialing in on the adjustments that need to be made to whatever our process is that we are in, big or small. I think that this might be a day where we can kind of ask the gods or ask ancestors for some extra information in terms of anything that feels destined or fated. And, we have like a convoluted conversation around those two words here on the podcast. Because I have a lot of mutable signs in my chart, so I contain multitudes, aka I have a lot of opinions about things, and I can't ever decide on any of them. But the North Node is something that brings us into proximity with the idea of destiny or the idea of fate. And what that destiny is or what that fate is, in my opinion, is nowhere near as interesting as the conversation that we get to have with ourselves around what is destiny? Why do I believe I'm fated for something? Why do I believe that something is destined for me? Why do I think that this is my destiny? How we utilize those words and how we interact with those ideas, I think, is almost more interesting than whatever it is that it's pointing to. But whatever it is that it's pointing to, whatever the North Node points at and says, hey, don't you want this? And we're like, yeah, I do want it. Is really enlightening in terms of our deepest desires and our hungers and our, ultimately sometimes that's pointing to our insecurities and the things that we are afraid are not going to happen for us, et cetera, et cetera. So again, I think it can be a pretty cool conversation to have with ourselves around that stuff. Jupiter wants to make everything bigger, but Jupiter also can bring in opportunity, luck, or just an expansive mindset. And that's always helpful when we are thinking about where we are headed in the world. To be expansive, to be optimistic, to be open-minded. A phrase that I keep saying to folks that I think is very appropriate when it comes to this conversation with Jupiter and the North Node is staying open to the positive potentials of the unknown. It's difficult when you have experienced trauma. It's difficult when you have experienced shocking, negative events, especially when they have happened over and over again, especially when you have lived in environments where day in and day out, the environment was unstable, unsafe. It's very difficult to convince ourselves internally to stay open to the positive potentials of the unknown. Our whole internal dialogue and mechanism is structured towards keeping us safe from the negative potentials of the unknown. And here we're asking ourselves to kind of literally do the opposite of that. So be forgiving also with yourself if you're not instantly waking up, Thursday morning, like, hooray for life, check it out, who knows, it could be so wonderful. Yeah, like if that's not naturally how you feel, it's reasonable. But a very potent and exciting day to have that conversation with yourself around all of those topics. Okay. Looking at our holy days for June 1st, it is gay month. It's time for gay. That's why all the musicals, right? This is LGBTQIA 2 Spirit Plus History Month in the United States and in a lot of places around the world. This is a beautiful month. Hey, right here in Gemini season. Interesting. Beautiful month to reconnect with your queer community, reconnect with your queer history, reconnect with your queer mentors, to celebrate your queer community, to celebrate queer artists and queer inventors and queer scientists and all of the incredible contributions to humanity that homos have brought us, including, but not limited to, this very podcast. You're welcome. We are everywhere. And we have an entire month to celebrate. So, bitch, you better get your rainbows up. And don't, as a side note, do not contribute to or participate in rainbow capitalism. If you want to buy some cute rainbow stuff to wear to your local pride event or something like that, find a local independent maker who is printing t-shirts or making flags or making stickers or whatever, and support your local queers this month, whatever it is. Go to that queer bakery, go to that, gay clothing store. Don't just go to the gay clubs and take up space. We appreciate you and you're cute, but dial it back, kids. But go to the gay bar and tip your bartenders, tip your local drag queens, because those cats are out there on the front lines right now, fighting this absolutely ridiculous culture war that we are engaged in our country. Support, support, support. We know that gay people, trans people, non-binary folks have been embedded in all of our religious ceremonies from the dawn of time, all of our magical traditions since the dawn of time. Mercury, literally Hermes, as in Hermes Trismegistus, who we just celebrated last week, polygendered non-binary being, right? Right there. One of our main deities that we work with. Don't get me started. Oh, it's too late. I've already gotten started. All right, here we are. But that's it. June 1st kicks off this beautiful month. Steep in it. Soak in it. Get it on you. All right. Also on this day from our Roman friends and ancestors, we have the Lesser Quinquatrus. We talked about the Quinquatrus earlier in the year, but this is dedicated to farming a little bit, and it's dedicated to military stuff a little bit. And yeah. Okay. And then also on this day from our Druid friends and ancestors, we have Hamadryad's Day. And this is a day dedicated to celebrating dryads, as in the literal embodiment of the spirit of the woods, the forest, the earth itself. Something we see a lot of throughout spring and Beltane season. And that brings us to our last day of the lunar week, Friday, June 2nd. Our astrology for this day, we have Venus in Cancer trine Neptune in Pisces at 27 degrees. What a lovely way to round out this week. We start with some bummer jams at the beginning of the week. The vibes lighten up a little bit halfway through, and now here we get to the end, and it's about as lovely as you can get when it's Venus and Neptune trining each other, hanging out together. This is art, this is romance, this is beatific, it is sensual, it is rapturous, it is heavenly, it's lovely. This is a fantastic time to make some art, see some art, lounge around in a muumuu in the sun, and just like glory in existence on planet Earth. Eat some tasty food, listen to some good music. If you're going to shows and all that stuff, be safe, take care of yourself. But generally speaking, this is a fine, fine time for making art, being art, enjoying art, living the fantasy, being the fantasy, all of that stuff. Very, very much so. If there's anything that we want to watch out for in this at all, it is that when Neptune gets involved in stuff, we can really forget the body a little bit. So make sure you drink some water on this day. Make sure you have some snacks on this day. Even if you have to like literally make a message to yourself or like leave a note in your phone or something that's like, have a snack, just to like bring yourself back to earth for like a brief moment, and then pew back out into the cosmos. That's all I ask. That's all I ask. And then later in the evening, Friday night, or Saturday morning, depending on where you are on Earth, the moon will enter Sagittarius, and that is officially our pre-funk beginning for the full moon that we're going to have next week. Cute. Yes, we have a full moon next weekend. Cute. Okay. All right. Sorry. Actually, I'm not sorry. So our holy days this week, we have from our global friends and ancestors, International Sex Workers Day. Goddess bless the sex workers. She did, by the way. Sex workers, oldest tradition, right? Oldest industry on the planet, most likely. Hieros gamos, right? The sacred marriage, the sexual union, here in the heart of Beltane season. How appropriate is that? Celebrate your local hooker, support your local hooker. And listen to your local hooker, listen to your local strippers. There is something I've known about this, but I just recently read about it again and was reminded of it. There is something called the stripper index, where strippers and sex workers often know about weird ripples in the economy before anybody else. Think about that for a second. It's all connected, baby. It's all connected. Makes sense though, doesn't it, when you think about it? Yeah, it does. It does. Absolutely. I love it. Okay. And so also on this day, we have from our Norse friends and ancestors, Sin's Day, Syn. Sin is a goddess associated with defensive refusal. She is sort of this boundary or this edge or this bulwark. She's kind of like she guards the doors, she's a shield, she's like, you need to back it up just a little, or else. And briefly running through my stuff here, like where are my notes? Where are my notes? Clicking frantically. Sorry. Here we go. Okay, sorry. I'm a professional and I don't know what I'm doing. Also on this day from our pagan friends and ancestors, this is from our modern Wheel of the Year calendars, we have the Shapatu of Ishtar, very appropriate with all the Venus stuff happening this week. The Shapatu is sort of the celebration, the birth of, it's not exactly the birth, but it's sort of like the renewal of the goddess Ishtar. Also interesting with the connections to our dawn goddesses, Eos, that we talked about earlier in the week. Ishtar definitely in some of her forms is connected to dawn, is also sometimes depicted as Venus as a morning star, and that would be Venus in that planet's western elongation, just like Mercury this week. And then from our Catholic friends and ancestors, we have St. Elmo's Day. I'm not going to say a whole lot about this, but what I will say is this. St. Elmo, fairly well known for his infamous fire, right? A lot of fire stuff going on this week. That's interesting. Of course, St. Elmo's fire was actually lightning at the top of ship masts. And ships are something that come under the auspices of Mercury and Gemini. So all of that stuff is sort of dialed in together. Um, and is there anything else that I want to say about that? Let me type frantically and see if there's anything else that I need to say about this. Oh, yes, there is. So Saint Elmo, patron saint of sailors, as I said, the lightning at the top of the mast is usually called Saint Elmo's fire. They were named if it was one bolt of lightning or two bolts of lightning, depending on how many masts the ship had. They were referred to as Castor and Pollux. Check it out. That would be the twins that Gemini is named for. Interesting stuff. You gotta love it. Okay, that's our Holy Week. Excuse me, that's our yeah, fuck it, it's a Holy Week. That's our lunar week. And so briefly going back over the astrology before we get into the tarot, witchcraft, and journal prompts. What have I got for you? Saturday, May 27th, 8:22 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, we have a waxing half moon at 6 degrees of Virgo. Sunday, May 28th, we have the sun in Gemini square Saturn in Pisces at 6 degrees. May 29th, we have the moon stepping into Libra. May 30th, we got nothing. May 31st, we have our gibbous moon at 24 degrees of Libra, and then the moon scooches on into Scorpio. June 1st, Thursday, we have Thursday, perfectly. We have Jupiter in Taurus conjunct the North Node at 3 degrees. And Friday, June 2nd, we have Venus in Cancer, trine Neptune in Pisces at 27 degrees, and then the moon moves into Sagittarius and begins its pre-funk for the full moon. So our tarot card this week, I've been kind of bouncing back and forth between moving through the minor arcana of that are connected to Gemini, and moving through the major arcana. But with the Western elongation of Mercury as a morning star this week, I think working with the major arcana card, the Magician, is appropriate for us this week. We've got plenty of Mercury vibes going on. But as I think I said last week, if I didn't, I'll say it now. I think that here's our collection of tarot that we're working with for Gemini season. We're working with the Magician, that's Mercury. We're working with the Lover's card, that's Gemini, Mercury being the ruling planet of Gemini. And then we are working with the 8, 9, and 10 of Swords. And the 8, 9, and 10 of Swords are cards that people feel kind of uncomfortable with, and they're weird. I have a piece written about the 8 of Swords for patrons that was released last year. I'll be putting this up on my website this year for you all. Hopefully, I will write the piece for the 9 of Swords and maybe even the 10 of Swords. I don't know if I'm going to get to it, but I'm really going to try. It's been, let me say this. I have had so many half-started projects this year, and I'm sure some of you can really relate to this. Like when I got sick, I have an entire presentation ready for you all, the patrons, and whoever else wanted to show up for the astrology of the year. I have all these slides. I have this whole thing written out, and I still haven't taught it or presented it because I just haven't been able to catch up with my own bullshit. So, stuff. Okay. But either way, the Magician is a really great card to work with at this time of year. And why I'm listing off all five is so that you can kind of, choose your own adventure. If you're like, I'm not really feeling the magician vibes right now, that's cool. You've got options. Um, and so in the magician card, what we see is a person who is, and I'm talking about the Smith Waite deck. In the magician card, what we see is a person who is wearing a red cloak or robe over a white robe. They have a white headband. They're holding up a wand. They have what looks like a blue belt. And they have a table in front of them with all these items on it. And what we are seeing is a person who is ready to do the work. They have an infinity symbol over their head, indicating just how close they are to source. They're holding this double ended wand up to the sky to literally draw down the energy. Think of a lightning rod. Wahaha, yeah. Think of that St. Elmo's fire crackling at the top of that wand coming down from above. Their other hand is pointing down. And so they're literally saying, let me be the conduit from the information coming above to the manifestation below. I'm ready. I'm ready, coach. Put me in. We'll find out if we're actually ready. The belt is a blue snake. It is an Ouroboros biting its own tail. And so there's, some pretty cool infinity symbols in this card that are like, I've been doing this. I do this and I will be doing this, right? First and last and always for the Sisters of Mercy fans out there. And the items that are on the table in front of them are the 4 suits from the minor arcana. And so basically what this person is saying is, I am fairly free of motivation, like personal motivation. That's the white robe. I'm acting on behalf of the universe, or I'm trying to. My red robe is saying, I'm really passionate about playing this role. Let's do it. And I'm holding this wand up to the sky saying, give me the juice, give me the information, give me the power, give me the data, let's go. I'm pointing down because I intend to utilize it here on the physical plane on Earth with other humans. And I've got all my tools in front of me on my altar, on my work table, ready to go. Let's do this. My mind is open. I'm clear thinking, right? Mence, right off the bat from the beginning of the week. I'm clear thinking. I'm ready to go. I'm passionate, thinking about Joan of Arc being so passionate and clear in their destiny and their goals and what they wanted to manifest in the world. We just last week had a holiday dedicated to Hermes Trismegistus, yet another iteration of Mercury and the Magician. So we really are in this time period of kind of like, let me see it, right? We've got this open-minded and expansive opportunity with Jupiter conjunct the North Node, etc., etc., etc. So being open to the positive potentials of the unknown, important. Recognizing that we are here, that there might be a job for us to do, and that we could be actually capable of doing it. And then there is also something really kind of quietly understated in the Magician of, I am a vessel for this. And we have that message too running through our week of, let me be a vessel for this. Um, let me hit the bullseye, right? Let me see what needs doing and let me do it. And this is a person who is like, I'm aimed, I'm ready to go. I'm going to hit the target. Let's make stuff happen. So that is our week of stuff. For our witchcraft this week, same as last week, brewing things, wearing bright colors, sex and sensuality, divination, all very, very appropriate and fantastic. And our journal prompts for this week, where are you feeling friction or constriction around your responsibilities? Where am I feeling impatient? What might benefit from me slowing down a little bit? And who are my co-conspirators? And am I connecting with them in meaningful and beautiful ways? That's what's up. I hope you all have a fantastic week. I hope you all get your motherfucking witchcraft done and cooking. And I will see you fools around the cauldron. Mwah! Blessed be. Bye for now.